Good evening, everyone. Welcome to week 4 of cybersecurity management. And I already saw a hand up. So, Simba, yes, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, An.
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick question in regards to assignment one. I
Mm-hmm.
believe the assignment should be 1,500 words with yeah, like the allowance of an extra 20%, and it has to be it has to be at least 3 pages. So let's just say with my particular assignment, it's 4 pages, but it's around the 1,600 yeah, like mark as far as like the words. So will I get penalized in yeah, this sort of situation?
No. As you already mentioned, there's a 20% allowance, isn't that right? Let me double
Yep.
check. Then it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So 1,500 plus or minus 20%. So yeah, this is around that. You'll be fine.
Oh,
Okay, cool.
Simon,
Thank you.
is that like your report with the reference list, or is that just your report?
Just a
With the
report.
reference list.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Did you like increase the margin or anything? How did you fit it under 4 pages?
No, like no, I didn't reduce like yeah, like any of the formatting or anything. Well, as far as like question one, like I had well, I put in the table, and I gave like a brief summary. So maybe that's why it's over 4 pages. Sorry, that maybe that's why it's about 4 pages.
Okay.
Okay. It's great. Anyone else have questions? Just a kind reminder that the assignment is due this week, right? So if you haven't started, then it's time to apply for extension. Any other questions regarding the logistic of the units or on the assignment?
Oh, I did
Yep.
wonder, like last week we learned about governance in cybersecurity
Mm-hmm.
and compliance, but I only think I include the compliance component in my report. Is there like somewhere I'm supposed to include the governance as well?
Um, are you referring to the assignment? Some questions, specific question on the assignment?
Yeah, because there is like one for CIA triad,
Mm-hmm.
there's one for legal compliance,
Mm-hmm.
and there's one for ethical like frameworks and
Okay.
principle. But
Yeah.
I didn't see like a clear part for governance.
If they did not ask you, then you don't have to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Good. Hi, King.
Hi, and
Yeah.
I would like to ask about the assignment two because I have seen uh, in the Calticon there's not yet to have the rubric. So when we can have the rubric of the assignment two, yeah, I would like to start it earlier because
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Then,
yeah, it
yeah,
seems that we take
I
time
understand.
to finish the assignment. So I
Yes,
would like to start earlier.
yes, I think it's worth sending Jamal an email regarding that. I think because he's working on the assignment rubric, so he may be able to help you out with that. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have access to the rubric at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Maybe I
yeah,
just ask him by email. Thank
yep,
you.
yeah. Ask him by email. Okay, so no more questions. That's good. I hope everyone is making good progress with assignment one, and don't be too stressful about that assignment one because you have two other assignment as well, right? So yeah, just take it easy. Um, just try to apply whatever you have learned in the last few weeks on this assignment. And the assignment has no strict question or anything, so don't worry, it's not too hard. Okay, let's move on to this week's content. And this week we focus on cybersecurity policy. Okay, so it is one of the ultimate goals of cybersecurity management is at the end, we want to come up with a very meaningful cybersecurity policy, right? So it is not all the goals of cybersecurity management, but it's one of the very most important goals of cybersecurity management is to get a policy right. Right. So what is a policy? I mean, you must have come across this policy in the daily life a lot, right? Policy here, policy there, policy everywhere. And what is a policy? What is a cybersecurity policy? Where is it? I think it's on the definition somewhere. Where is it? This is a different from the 4-page version. Okay, let me take this 4-page version instead. Because in this one, there's a definition. Okay, so what is a cybersecurity policy? Okay, so let's start with that first. A cybersecurity policy is ultimately a document, right? What is treated as a formal directive that establishes guidelines for the protection of organizational assets, compliance with legal and regulatory requirements, and the maintenance of securing operating environment. So in other words, it's just a rule book. Right? It tells you what you can do and what you cannot do, right? And it gives you a guide of like what step to do to accomplish a certain goal. Yeah? But ultimately, it's a rule book that you can refer to before you do anything in the company. So why is cybersecurity policy important? Why is this important to have these rule books established as early as possible? What do you think? Yeah, I would just ask this question to all the workshop and elicits a lot of interesting insights on what do you think cybersecurity policy is important. Why is this necessary? Can you do without it?
You can do without it, but there is no control, and it is easy to I mean, yeah, I mean, without it you can do, but the thing is, it is hard to control everyone in the organization. So your data is everywhere, so it might pose risk to the internal threats and all those things unless you control it.
So the idea is that the policies help you to control things, right?
Yeah, correct.
Is that the best way to summarize it? Okay, that's a good point. Thanks, Raju. Daniel?
Hey, yeah, I'd just say that I guess while ignorance of the law is not an excuse, ignorance of policy is an excuse for employees. So if employees don't know how they're expected to behave at an organization, then it's hard to hold them accountable when they do something that essentially is bad for the organization. So you write policies to direct employees how to act, and then you can hold them accountable because you've informed them of how you expect them to act.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I think that that apply to all kind of policy, right? Not just cybersecurity policies. Can you relate that accountability to the context of cybersecurity? What does accountability in cybersecurity context mean when something bad happens? Holding someone accountable, what does it mean?
I guess if you had a password policy, for example, where you were to inform to not share your passwords with people, and an employee was to do that, and that resulted in a breach because that password was leaked somewhere, then you could hold that employee accountable to the impact on the organization. If the organization has been, had a data leak, for example, then you can essentially fire or, suspend that employee.
I see. Okay.
Because of that incident. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think related to that, I think you can, so the policy can be used as evidence in court. So it means that you can fire someone if they violate the policy and that person it will find it very difficult to sue the company back, right? Because there's a policy has been written like this, and I think if I'm not mistaken, in the context of Australia, you can use that as a evidence in court to to make sure that you will not get sued, because that employees, for example, have been shown to clearly violate the policy. Then it means that there's no way for them to sue the company if they get fired. Yes, Connor.
Yeah, just something to add in there though is, policy is one thing, but if you're going to discipline people as well, there has to be suitable training that ties in with the policy.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, certain stuff like that, like sharing a password, that's definitely one that you could certainly use as a disciplinary action. But like from a government perspective, like that's never going to happen. No one's ever getting fired over breaching a cybersecurity policy. Because you're going to have a real hard time attracting employees if that becomes something that is a standard. And I already know that there's multinationals at the moment where you'll get fired if you click on a phishing email.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like there's multinationals now where, it's a 3 strikes you're out rule, where if you click on if they do simulations and you click on the simulation 3 times, they'll fire you on the spot because you're deemed a risk to the organization. And I understand the sentiment, but you got to train people as well. So yeah, as Daniel sort of said, like policy is, you got to make people aware of what the expectation is.
Yep. I'm surprised that they have this like very strong penalty. And I assume that before they implement that 3 strikes policy, they should have like trained people first. And after each strike, they should have warned people that you have a few strikes left. But I'm surprised that the policy is one thing, but whether it has been enacted or not, it means someone actually got fired because of that is a different question, right?
I think if you worked at a bank and you left the vault door open, you'd probably get fired. So it's probably not quite synonymous, but you could stretch to reach that after a certain amount of if somebody had multiple incidents, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's a gray area at the moment. It's a new territory for businesses, I think. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it evolves over time.
Is this a gray area? What do you mean gray? You mean like
well, it's not really
fire people.
Well, it's not really been tested in law, has it? Like the law hasn't kept up with this technology. The law's not keeping up with cybersecurity very well. And if you started doing mass firings, for example, because people fail a phishing test and they take it before a compensation claim court, I'd have to do some more research to see if there's actual precedents set for that.
Yeah.
And like you said, Connor, it's probably the awareness piece is the most important part of that, right? Like train the people how to do it, and then you can, as an organization, justify that. I guess you've not only taken due care by having the policy, but you're actually enforcing the policy, and you're making your people aware that of why it exists and that they are accountable to it. And ultimately, the goal is to protect the organization, right, and make sure that the customer's data isn't stolen, or and there's no financial impact or identity theft or whatever. So the goal isn't to suspend employees because they can't pass a phishing email. It's to protect the organization, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Connor, and thank Daniel. Andres, yes, you want to add something?
Yes, I guess in my company now we view policy as something meant to be punish employees with that. I always view it as a tool to help employees and help company to maintain itself, to maintain process. Kind of for me, policy was first of all proof that certain work been done. So it not just took it from thin air. We did work and we put it in a paper as a best practice, as the way to do things, to stay safe, to stay productive.
Okay. Yeah.
I kind of never actually thought about it as a this will use to punish people.
Yes. Yes, King.
Yeah, I agree with Andrew. Yes, I do not think that the cybersecurity policy is to punish the employee. They may have to set up a good practice, how it will be protected. Because there's not only the policy to protect the company, also a lot of teams, a lot of softwares, a lot of infrastructure that can help to protect the cybersecurity, but not the policy. But rather than that is to educate and also to show how it should be like for the cybersecurity group best practice. Yeah, because I worked in bank before, it's not that serious that they will fire the employee if they fail the punishing test. Maybe they will have got some email to their manager and tell that one of your team member did not pass it, but there may some extra training only. Yeah, it may be too serious. Of course, unless they will have some incident occur, but even though some incidents occur, they will be reported to the regulation or do something, maybe punishment. But is as mentioned that I don't know who mentioned it. It will lead to some court case if they fire the people easily because of they fail a test or even an incident.
I see.
Because
Yes.
it's only one. It's not only a single person's responsibility to protect the whole company's cybersecurity.
Yep. Yep. So I agree that this example may be too extreme, but I think this is an example of how the policy can help to enforce those extreme cases if needed, right? So if you want to fire people for failing the phishing email, for example, then that has to be written somewhere in the policy. So the policy has to be clear so that it can hold up in court. The policy is there for the company to control its own behavior as well. So it's lay out what is acceptable and what is not, right? So that is one of the reasons why cybersecurity policy is important. But yeah, let's go back to the concept of like a cybersecurity policy as a set of rules, right? And to see what happens if you don't have it. Yeah, so that is to highlight the necessity of having this policy. So imagine two companies, and one company has a very detailed cybersecurity policy, and another have no cybersecurity policy. Then what do you think of those two companies? I mean, of the second company. What would happen to those second company if they don't have such a cybersecurity policy in place? Yes, Connor.
Well, one thing straight away would be, reputation. If we're talking, private business, you're trying to attract customers. Let's use an example of like a cloud service provider, for example. Yeah, you're a customer, you're looking at a cloud service, you're probably going to pick one that has a policy that's advertised, or at least, where they make some sort of reference to it, rather than one that doesn't seem to care at all.
Okay. Yep. So from the customer point of view, you will feel more assured if you deal with the company with a policy in place, right?
Yeah, I guess it would be reputation, or customer appeal, or customer satisfaction.
Okay. But let's say that this policy is purely for internal example, and some the companies are not required to disclose whether they have the security policy or not, right? Let's assume that this policy is only for internal, and think about what happened if one company doesn't have a cybersecurity policy in place. Marshall, yes.
Yeah, just one thing that's coming to mind is that the company could then become liable to certain incidents. For example, if they don't have a data encryption policy stating what encryption methods they're using, then that doesn't have a guideline for them, the network administrators, and to do their job. They can encrypt with whatever they see fit, but then the business could be seen liable for those decisions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And being liable here means like being target for attacks, right? They are be subject to attacks.
Yeah, in the sense that they have no audit trail of their decisions from a business point of view, so that the business may be seen as not doing their job in protecting the data, and then there's privacy laws around that.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah. So you are more leaning toward the compliance, right? Because actually, there are some laws here, as we see, requires policy, right? So if we don't have policy, then we're breaking the laws here. That's what you you're suggesting. Yes. Daniel, yes, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just say that to a degree, sometimes policy can be a bit of a plan, right? So if you had two companies, one has a policy, one doesn't. If there is an incident that affects both companies, the company that has a policy is going to be able to react. They're going to have less downtime. They're going to protect their customers' data more likely, and generally just have less impact. So it's like a plan.
Yeah, precisely. So it shows preparedness, like you are prepared, right? So a detailed policy means that you have think through this problem, and you are prepared for attack. So it's mean when, as you said, when the incident happened, you're not scrambling, see like what happens and who's responsible, thing like that. But once you have the policy in place, then you just go to that documents and hopefully you find the information that you need. It's like a playbook. That's great. So far we have a few ideas on why cybersecurity policies are important. The first one is compliant. The second one is about response to incident, and the third one is about what is it? I'm sorry. Let's remind me again. The first one that we mentioned. What is it? About reputation, right? Okay, and yeah, is that it? Is that 4 points that we have discussed? Did I miss something? I feel that I missed something. So we have liability in terms of the law, and then we have being prepared for incident, and we have reputation. Okay, and we have like not getting sued by the company, by the employees, right? If you fire someone, then at least you have some evidence that that person is violating the policy. Okay, I think that seemed to cover it. Unless someone have other ideas of why cybersecurity is important. Cybersecurity policy is important as a document.
I guess maybe one more to add on to the end of that is that like you've got the legal, you've got the reputational, but like ultimately you're protecting people from harm, right? So like if their information is leaked and then their identity gets stolen, like I guess that's one of the ultimate goals, right? Is to stop money getting stolen, stop identities getting stolen, protect both your company and if you have customer data or if you have employee data or any sort of, I guess, personal information or sensitive information, you're protecting that. So I guess the policy just gives guidance. It's a plan. It, like you've written there, it shapes behavior of the employees at the company to achieve that ultimate goal.
Yeah, shape behavior. I think, so ultimately we want to protect the company, like everything in the company to achieve the cybersecurity goals. And the policy is a way to, as you said, to shape the behavior toward that goal. Okay, I think that's good. That's great. Right. So now we have understand why cybersecurity is important. Just a few interesting properties of the cybersecurity policy. Right. So first is the use of the cybersecurity policy. And in this slide, there's a very few interesting points that I want us to discuss. I want you guys to share the opinion on this. The first one is said, cybersecurity policy is the least expensive means of cybersecurity control. What do you think of this? And do you agree with this? So you have to unpack this sentence a little bit. First, it say that cybersecurity policy is a control. It's a means of control. And the second important word is it's the least expensive. It means it's the cheapest one. What do you think we mean by this? Yes, Daniel.
I guess there must be evidence to back up that policy is cheaper than technology to implement cybersecurity controls, right? So like maybe the rollout of a password manager across an organization is more expensive than a policy. The organization would have done, I guess, a level of risk management to work out, whether if we roll out this policy, it's probably more likely an incident will happen, but it's gonna, the cost of that incident would be X. That's cheaper than what it would cost to roll out this password manager, just as an example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so let's hear it from Connor as well.
Yeah, I think the same. I think from a financial perspective, it's the least expensive. However, from a time and people, like an FTE equivalency, it can get more expensive because you've got to educate, as we said in the previous, you've got to educate people on it, you've got to disseminate it, you've got to spend the time writing it. Any good one, if you're looking for something that's going to cover you legally too, you're going to get legal advice on, get it, reviewed to make sure. And yeah, as Daniel's just said too, like poorly written policies, like imagine you write one, it doesn't achieve the results. You lump it all together as quick as you can because you really want to get one in place, but then you spend so many hours rewriting it every time that it doesn't go wrong. And you got to also figure out like where do you draw the line, because you could end up with a policy that's 100 pages long trying to cover everything in the cyber landscape.
Okay, yeah. So you talking about the policies, even though it's less expensive, it's not very easy to write. Right? We have a good one. Okay, Andres.
Well, from my experience, the majority of employees in the company, they actually don't want to do harm to the company. They want to do right things, but usually they're not computer literate. They, especially if they're not programmers, if they just clerks, they have little knowledge about how the things works. Things which kind of basic for us, for them becomes really hard and complicated. So when you give them the policy, which outlines basically basic stuff like how to handle passwords, how to handle phishing emails, and do some trainings, that kind of gives them the good basics to kind of for day-to-day tasks. So that reduces a lot incidents, like basic incidents in the company, when people can just govern themselves. Sometimes they can help each other to deal with this threat, because that becomes something they knew, they heard about. So for me, like that's one of the least expensive measures, because you just have to continue teaching new employees, but overall, if you keep culture, cybersecurity culture on certain level in the company, you have much less stress and issues day to day to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. That's a very good point. When you talk about culture, so it means once you have the culture established already, then rolling out the policies would be really easy, right? Cheap, no problem. Yes, King.
I agree with what Andrew say, because what this means the least expensive is for the point of view for cybersecurity control by a company, rather than buy a lot of software, invest a lot to control everything that will harmful to the cybersecurity. We can teach the staff, teach the employee what is the best practice, and they may sometimes cannot follow in 100%, but at least they can have a knowledge or basic practice how to run it well. It will much save more money rather than you install a lot of control. Just like a shop, you install a lot of CCTV, it will take a lot of money to make sure the security. But rather than that, a good practice of how it lock the door, how for the staff, it can help more than the CCTV.
Okay.
And also, in the operation side, the cyber control is saving time costs because in a lot of incidents, the employee, if they do not have a cybersecurity policy, they may not know how to do. Even if there's not an incident, when they have questions, every time they have to ask the manager, or every time the manager have to ask the cybersecurity team, it may consume much more time than teach them a good policy.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting angle about the operational costs as well. Yep. Thanks. Marshall, yep.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I definitely on the side of thinking that it is a cybersecurity control, being that insider threat is one of the biggest threats for an organization, and having these policies that mandate behavior is just one control that they can business can put in really quickly, or I wouldn't say quickly, but that can put in to help reduce the insider threat, whether that's intentional or not. As for the expense, much like what the other people have said with Connor, and that it really depends on how much the organization is willing to put in for that. You could pay an employee to, run one up really quickly in a day. It might be not very good, but it can be done at that price. But a lot of organizations, I think, do it partially with some internal people as well as external parties. So outsourcing to experts to help them write these policies and review them. So I think, yeah, it really depends on the organization to how much they spend on how expensive a policy is to create.
Thank you, Marshall. I'm very glad to finally hear about the definition of cybersecurity control here, like with respect to policy, because yes, you are right. You're absolutely right that it is a cybersecurity control, but we need to understand what is this controlling, right? And you are right to point out that it is controlling human. It's controlling the weakest link in cybersecurity, which is the human. And insider threats, as you mentioned, is a big threat, and it's very difficult for technology to enforce control on insider threats. And for example, I mean, you have firewalls, you have intrusion detection system and endpoint security, but they are almost useless against insider threats. Right? So if the employees are behaving badly, for example, or just naively, then you're in big trouble. There's no amount of expensive IT solution can help you with that. But it turns out that cybersecurity policy can go a long way because it has shaped the behavior of the employee. So it prevents employees from doing things that are bad for cybersecurity. So that is very important. And so it's least expensive. Here we have to put an asterisk on this because as Connor has raised a point about it's not easy to implement or to write a meaningful policy, right? So and this goes to the second point here when you say it's difficult to implement. So one way to interpret this is difficult to implement difficult to write a meaningful policy. You have to trial and error, and you have conflicts and things like that. But let's stick with these properties that is a cybersecurity policy is difficult to implement. What other angle that you can think about this? So one angle, as mentioned earlier, is that it's difficult to write a policy, to implement it, as in to write a meaningful policy. But what else can we say regarding this point? Why cybersecurity policy is difficult to implement? Yes, Connor. Yeah.
Well, what KPI are you going to compare it against to demonstrate that it is being effective?
Okay, so by that you mean
hard,
difficult to evaluate, right?
Yeah, it's hard to manage sorry, not manage. It's hard to, systematically or statistically obtain figures or some tangible evidence that it's effective.
Does everyone agree with that? When so the Connor's point that is difficult to obtain evidence that the policy is effective. Is that the one of the argument, Connor? That difficult to obtain the evidence that is effective, right?
Yeah, that's it. It's like there's you can't, other than people agreeing that yes, I have read this policy. You just got to hope that there's nothing that breaches it. I guess, you could argue that no breaches of policy is an effective measure.
Yeah.
Or it could just be people are really good at hiding their breaches.
Yeah. But can you imagine a system where you have a policy and you have some monitoring system in place, and see how many times this policy have like caught people from doing bad things, for example? Then would that be useful as a measure?
Well, yes and no. I mean, your systems are not typically, your policy is not going to typically highlight technical, heavily technical controls. As it says, it's meant to shape behavior and influence decisions.
Okay.
There'll be certain actions that you might be able to catch, but like, the sharing of a password, how are you going to catch that using some sort of monitoring system?
That's true. Yeah. But it's not impossible, right? So there should be some way to evaluate some aspect of the policy. Otherwise, it's difficult for people to judge whether this policy is good or not. So,
I think that's where, a big part of an ISMS or any sort of internal policy is auditing. You got to self-audit, and then you should also get third-party audits.
Okay. So just following up on this thread, so the third-party auditor, do you think they use some metric to judge whether the policy is good or not? It's all subjective.
I would say it's subjective, because every business, every industry, depending on what sort of assets you're holding, it all becomes very nuanced.
Okay. Yep. Okay, I completely agree that this is not easy to evaluate this, but I hope that the policy making some progress on actually putting putting the research on how to evaluate a policy. Yep, let's see. Marshall, I saw the hands up first, and then it was down. Do you still have to? Do you still want to add something to the conversation?
No, I think you covered off basically what I was going to suggest anyway, that it's difficult to enforce some of these policies. Like Connor said, basically what I was going to say was sharing passwords. There's a level of trust there, and writing the policy to train and teach our employees what they need to be doing. But you can't really stop them from verbally sharing it with someone else. There is other controls that can be enforced, but there is definitely some of these policies that the only thing you can do is train your employees on.
Yeah, of course, it's not foolproof as any other cybersecurity controls, not foolproof. That's why you need a sort of layer defense that we'll discuss in a little bit. Andres, yes, please.
Well, I guess the challenges here as first of all we have to actually literally teach people, which is not a simple thing to do, especially if you never did teaching. So and normally computer security experts are not not teachers. So for them, this can be a challenging thing to teach someone. Second, as Conrad mentioned, it's hard to evaluate if actually this teaching bear any fruits or not, because the only way you could do it is kind of do a stress test on people. I guess there's not really any other way you could prove they know. You could maybe do like again tests or like a some sort of evaluation to ensure. But again, people, as another thing is people, they don't come to the company to learn security or IT. They come to the company to do the business, and the least they care about my problem, they care about their problem. So kind of even kind of make them interested about security, about IT can be a challenge. And then another thing is the people are shifting jobs, they moving out in the company. So this never stops. You can't just do it once or do it once even in a month and hope for the best. You have to look how many people come to the company, how many left, how many people change positions because they might be need to be retrained sometime, and that also becomes another chore for security team, which might not be what they actually was in the job description. Just something they have to do because they want to have a security in company.
Yeah, yeah. I think training employee is not easy because yeah, I think none of us want to get trained. Get forced trained. I mean, all right, Raju. Yes.
Yes, I mean, so the apart from the human factors, also resource constraints and implementing the cybersecurity policy, I feel the regulatory compliance also a difficult one because we have local, local, national, international regulations that should be followed. Otherwise, the companies gets fined very hefty.
Okay, so is that part of the difficult to implement, or is
difficult to implement?
Okay, and the lines of reasoning is that difficult because the law is difficult to implement. Is that right?
Because it's not a single law, and it changes based on the place, and each country has its own laws. And the law is specific to local or else a national, international. For example, think about MNC companies where they span across multiple countries and they should follow every law wherever they operate.
Okay, I see. I think this is a good point, and it's also related to the third challenges in cybersecurity policy. Is it's not easy to guarantee compliance, and you're right when saying that the law is changing really fast, and if the company is expanding, right, it had to find it might be challenging when it's expanding. Think about Google and Facebook and all this is like big tech company. They have into big trouble when they try to expand to China, for example, because the compliance there, law and policy there is very different to the States.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else want to add to this conversation? Okay. Right. Okay. So I think let's going back to the point that it's not foolproof. Where is it? Where I want to show this. Yeah, this bull's eyes diagram here. That is what is illustrates the point that we just discussed is why we need sort of like layered defense, right? Because the policy is not foolproof, and to protect our system, to protect the access which is like sitting with the application in the center here, it's not sufficient surely to have this as a policy. It has to be used with other kind of defense as well. So the policy, and then we have the network level defense like firewall and intrusion detection system, for example. And then we have the system level defense like the operating system security and sort of like access control, thing like that. And you have the application level security like data encryptions or any sort of application level access control. Okay, so policy is not sufficient, but it's surely the the cheapest one that you can deploy as early as possible, right? And it's cheapest. So further you go down to this core, the more expensive it's gonna be. Yeah. Looking at this policy, do you guys have any? Looking at this figure, do you guys have any comments on this thing? Does this make sense? Or do you have a different interpretation of this bullseye model? So can we put the policy like after the network, for example, or after system? But why the policy is to be in the outermost layer here? Why do you think it's structured like this? Why the policy is a good first layer of defense, but not other technologies? Yes, Raju. Yes.
Probably I'll just explain with another example with the firewalls, for example.
Okay.
It is the first level of defense to I mean restrict the any attack from outside. For example, if it is after the network, then the network might compromise with the attack because there is no filter or else any defense there.
Okay. All right. So this is an example of the network defense, right?
Yes. I mean, if the policy is after network.
Okay. Then can you state the argument again, please? So what happened if the policy is after the network?
I'm just give an example in terms of firewall I'm talking about. So firewall is the one which basically filter from where the request is coming and what are the different domains are not allowed to interact with the inside network. Right. So if the policy is after the network, so we are allowing the unknown or else attacker into our network first, and then we are executing the policy.
Okay, and that makes sense too. Do you see any implication in terms of cost or in terms of like technical possibility doing that? Cost or like cybersecurity risk?
The risk would be, I feel like if an attacker can get into our network, it might make the applications underlying or else make the network down, kind of an attack.
Okay.
That would result in maybe downtime.
I see. Okay. Yep. I think that is a good point. I think you're referring to some kind of denial of service attack here, right?
Yeah, kind of. As an example.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Andres, yes, you want to share the view of this model?
Yeah, I think it's the first layer because the people actually are the weakest link of any modern security system. So majority of security issues would not happen if someone would not click some email or click some link or download a file if they're not supposed to. So by implementing policy, we're reducing the amount of incidents to start with, meaning our next system will have less things to deal with and will have less options to fail.
That's good. Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Any other comments? Any other way of viewing this? Yeah. So by filtering out a lot of like problem before it reaches on the network, right? Then it means that the network will have less incidents to deal with, fewer incidents to deal with. And for example, you can buy a little bit more expensive equipment to deal with a fewer number of incidents. Okay, so if you put the network at the outer layers, for example, then you have to deal with denial of service attack, for example. Yeah. So people can just bombarding the network, and you have to buy expensive boxes to deal with that. But now you hide it behind the policy layer, so it means like only the internal people can reach the network, and that's good. And you have less risk to deal with. Okay, cool. Let's go back to the content and describe there are three. Oh no, sorry, just put this one. So there are a few types of cybersecurity policy at a different level. The first one is enterprise level. So as usual, is written by top management. So very broad, very vague. And then we have system specific policy, which deal with the more the technical aspect of the policy on what policy to implement on the firewall and what policy to set for the access control, for example. And thing in the middle here, I would leave it to the activities later. Okay, so the one in the middle is what we call issue specific policy, and it sit somewhere between the top one and the bottom one. Right, and the last thing I want us to discuss is this. Okay, so you see, first we talk about cybersecurity policy, right? And then we talk about another type of policy called privacy policy. Why isn't cybersecurity policy enough? Why do we need privacy policy as well? I mean, isn't privacy part of cybersecurity? Like, for example, if the goal is to protect the data, can we subsume it under confidentiality in cybersecurity? For example, now, like if you can set one as a policy in the cybersecurity policy to encrypt all the data, do you think that is sufficient to provide the privacy for the user or customer? Why do we need a separate document focused entirely on privacy? Yeah, Andres, yes. What do you think?
So the privacy policy is actually not only company but also client facing. So clients need to see it. Clients need to know what our privacy policy is, how we intend to work with the data.
Okay.
So only for that, I guess we have to have it a separate document and publish it on the website, and that's it's a regulatory requirement as well to have one.
Okay, but is not sufficient to take a chunk out of the cybersecurity policy and present it as a privacy policy?
No, because it's not really is a matter of cybersecurity. You can be fully secure, but you still can misuse the data or abuse them or sell them to third party without consent. It's not cybersecurity anymore. It's more data handling and kind of different, no, related but still different subject.
Yeah, I think I want to go back on that point on what you said. Something is secure, but might still fail privacy. But before that, let's hear what Marshall has to say. Yes, Marshall.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to say that with your example about encrypting the data, that's more on one aspect of how do we protect the data. It's where the privacy policy needs to cover a lot. It's a completely different subject. It's more what data is the organization collecting? What are they doing with the data? Who are they sharing it with? Are they able to sell it? It's entirely what the organization intends to do with the either personal data or any data that they're collecting, and it's got an interest to the people that they're collecting data from. So if they're collecting data from me, I'm interested in what the organization is doing with my data.
Okay, so in what case you would say that the company violates your privacy? I mean, even when they say that they encrypt the data, for example, then under what circumstances that you would condemn them as not respecting the privacy? I know the definition is about what privacy policy requires is, I think, is correct. I mean, when you say about handling the data and sharing, but let's dig a little bit deeper and see and talk about a specific example on when you would say that the company has violated the privacy.
So, as a specific example, is if they don't allow me to I guess, delete my data. I think there's regulations around that where if they're collecting data from me, and so data retention policies, actually there's probably another policy, but basically where I want to, if I don't want you to have my data anymore, if it's my personal information, I can request it to be deleted, or there should be an option for that. And if you don't comply with that, you're essentially in non-compliance.
Okay. So it's about compliance, right? So what you're saying that is the policy say that I have a right to ask a company to delete my data, and this is related to my privacy right. And if the company not do that, then they are in violation of my privacy. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying there. Yep.
Okay. Yes, Andre, do you have another example?
Yeah, an example would be if, let's say, on a privacy policy, you usually have to specify exactly where you're going to use the client data, if you're going to sell to third party, and sometimes even to which kind of third party. And if you would do the data something which is not covered by privacy policy, means client did not agree to this, to do with this data, this will be a violation of a privacy policy.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm hearing is that you assume that there's some privacy policy in place, and you are giving example of violating the privacy, right?
Yes,
violating
basically
the policy. Okay.
All companies I work with have privacy policy of some sort, and always it's stated where data stored, what's happening with them, what rights client has on his data. It's all has to be described, and basically, as long as we're doing exactly what we said, we are covered. But if we would start doing something which we not disclosed to the client upfront, in the privacy policy, say we would say on our websites that we do not sell it to the third parties, but we actually do sell them. Or let's say we're using a CRM, which we don't even know that CRM might leak the data or sell the data on some conditions. That will be a violation of our privacy policy, and we can be liable for compensation if client would sue.
Yep. Okay. King, yes.
Yeah, I can make a very simple example, just like when you for example, like I go to the bank to open a bank account or buy some investment product, it have to be used my personal data to open the bank account. And in the meantime, everyone will experience that when they collecting the data, they will ask if you mind the data sharing to do the marketing purpose, and you have to opt in or opt out on this selection. Because if they don't ask this question, or if they don't get the customer's consent, they send it to another department. Not maybe this is not a third party. It is the same, the bank, to sell you any other type of product. They will violate the privacy rule. That's what's the meaning of the usage consents.
Okay. Yes, I think you said a very important keyword here, which is consent, right? So the question that I was like trying to seek the answer for is why confidentiality is not enough for data protection, but we need privacy as well. And as King just said, I think it's a question of consent, of like what the data is used for. It's not about the confidentiality, right? So privacy is not only about confidentiality, I guess. And gathering from our discussion is more about what to do with the data, and the user having a say, a consent on what the data is used for, right? So that is a very different concept from like the user CIA triad in cybersecurity, and that is why we need a privacy policy. It's not because the government enforces us to follow the privacy policy, but my question is more on why did the government even in the first place think draft this privacy policy? Why didn't they think that cybersecurity policies are enough? But I think the key point here is privacy is slightly different. It's have a lot of overlap with cybersecurity, but it's important, so important that it deserves its own sort of a legal framework. Right. Anyone else have other thing to chime in on this? The debate between like what the privacy is really still a very hot topic of research in cybersecurity. So it's not solved yet, right? Because even we have things like GDPR, where is it like GDPR and CCPA. There's a lot of pushback from the technology, from the companies, because some of this policy in this regulation is too strong. It's very difficult, very costly to be implemented, and yeah, so it's not really striking a good balance between like the privacy of the user and like what they can contribute to the company and to the overall function of the economy. Okay, so that's it. I think that is some of the main point about that, about the content of this week. It's about the policy. What are the policy? Why the policy are important, and why is it difficult to have a good one? And then there's a difference between cybersecurity policy and the privacy policy. And in modern companies, I expect that we need to have both. Okay. Okay, so I will skip the rest of the content and go straight to the workshop activities. Let me see where is it. Okay. So there's a lot of activities for this week, but I think for the time that we have left, I would like you guys to focus on this activity 3 and activity 5. So activity 3 is asking you to go to this website and take a look at the PSPF, which is a Protective Security Framework provided by the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Home Affairs. And this one is very comprehensive document of the policy that the company will need to meet if they want to protect their cybersecurity, asset and customer, right? So this is very long policies. There's a lot of policy in here, and they can be categorized in different area like security governance, information security, personnel security, and physical security. So what I want you guys to do is for each of you to take a look at this document and pick one of the policy that interesting to you, and then discuss with us, like so that you can lead the discussion about that policy. So let me give an example of how to do that. So if you click on this website, unfortunately, the link is not valid, but you would land on the right website, and just go to policy framework, and let's go to the latest release, which is this month, and just open up this document. There's so many different policy here, and the policies are the one in this blue boxes. Okay, so just pick one in any of the category that you find interesting. It could be related to the interest or relevant to the work. Just pick one. For example, I can just pick security clearance maintenance and take a look at this policy and read up on it and just discuss it with us. Just try to explain this policy to us. Many of this policy in this document refer to other documents for more detail. So in order to understand more about this policy, you need to follow that link to the other document to understand more on how these policies can be implemented in practice, for example. Okay. Let's take another one that refer to other documents. For example, if I take what is this? Let me take internet gateway policy that concerning firewalls and like a web server, for example, or like firewall or web proxy or application proxy. Then some of the policies say that are protected by gateway in accordance with the information security manual and gateway policy. So in order to understand more about this policy, you need to search for the Information Security Manual, which is another framework by another Australian government agency, and find out more detail on the gateways policy there. Yeah. And then enlighten us about this policy. Okay, so this is one task. Activity 3. So there's a lot of policy here. I think there's 100 of them covering a lot of different areas. And when I look at them, there's many policy I never know existed, and it's very interesting to read up on them. See this. I think let's just pick one, right? Just pick one simple policy, and then just if you want to discuss it with us today, then let's discuss today. But you cannot possibly cover all the policy in one day. But I just want to see like a very diverse interest in different aspects of the policy here. Okay, so this is activity 3, and activity 5 ask you to read up on the differences between different type of policy, like enterprise policy, issue specific policies, and system specific policy. And this is based on this NIST special publication. I think for this one you have to search, you have to do Google search for it, or search on this one is also fine. And in that document, they give you an example of what these 3 different type of policies are. And having read that, apply this to this scenario of drafting a policy about bring their own device. So we all know what's bring their own device to work mean, right? It means that says you can bring their own laptop to plug in to company network, or bring the iPhone and connect it to the network, things like that. Or bring the USB that you pick up off the street and plug it into the USB port in the server, thing like that. So this all under the scope of bring their own device. So how would you write a policy for bringing their own device to the for the company? And note that you might need to adopt an approach that can balance user convenience and IT control. So it means that it might not be a good idea to directly ban user from bringing their own device to work, right? So the policy should try some balance. Okay, so Andre said that it said that 814 was withdrawn, but it has been replaced, I believe, by some other documents. It said that, I think. Let me see. Let me double check. Okay, so SP. So yeah, so it has been withdrawn. Revised content can now be found in the following document. So please go to this SP 800-12 instead. I believe is in here. The information that you need in here. Yeah, in chapter 5, I believe. Yeah, there's information about security policy. This one. So it means that the information that the text here is not the most up to date. So I can just post this one to you guys directly. Okay, so so the task for this activity is please just take a quick look at the difference between these 3 policy and think like what is our policy about bring their own device, or what category would you put it in, whether it's a type of enterprise security or issue specific or system specific policy. And can you give 1 or 2 examples of the rules in the policy? Yeah. So that is a 2 activity. Activity 3, where you find a policy that you like and find out more information about it and share with us. And activity 5 is about bring their own device. So share with us the own policy for bringing their own device and explain the decision behind this policy. Okay, so let's give you guys 20 minutes to do this, and then we discuss again at 8 o'clock. Yeah, about these two activities, right? 3 and 5. Yeah. See you guys back at 8 o'clock. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. I hope you have a good read on the policies. All right, so anyone want to share the favorite policy from this framework? Yes, Connor. Yes. If you tell me the policy number, then I can just bring it here, and then everyone can see the.
Well, it falls under the security zone, so 24.
So requirement 0024. This one?
No. So the requirement number starts at 0196.
19196. Oh, okay. All right. So security zone. Yes, tell us more about this, please.
Yeah, this is something like the reason why I picked this is because I'm fairly familiar with the PSPF. We use it fairly heavily across most governments across the country. There's only 2 states really that don't implement or refer back to the PSPF for some guidance. And especially if you go to federal, this becomes your standard, like you must abide by the PSPF if you're in the federal government space. This whole section in here in the PSPF is dedicated to like physical security, and I find it fascinating, and it's something that typically gets overlooked. Because when you say cybersecurity or we're security professionals or cyber, people always think data, they think binary, they think ones and zeros, they think computers. They never think about the fact that under these sections, you actually have security zones. So this requirement for security zones to be certified in accordance with the PSPF. So if you scroll up a little bit on the page on your screen there, you can see that one more page, a little bit further, and you can see where it actually gives you the type of zones and then the sort of clearances that you need.
Okay. All right.
There we go. Yeah, zones 1, 2, 3. So buildings, a building that you put your office in, or even prior to this, there's policies about the design of a building. So an agency should be considering when it's building its own office, how it's designed, and again, that's security by design. We think of security by design a lot of the time as code and, doing good coding, but security by design also applies to physical. And so that policy, the 0196, it refers to ensuring that the zones 1 to 4 are certified by a certification authority, your certification authority being typically your chief security officer or a delegate within the organization. And what it means is that any agency or any business that incorporates the PSPF has to actually go through and determine, based on these zones, every room in their building and what is it zoned as, and then how do you control, or what sort of information is stored in those rooms, and then how do you control, or what sort of access are you going to restrict to those rooms?
But is this the job of the CISO to do that? Like an employee of the company certify the company's asset, the company zones, or it had to be a third party?
No, this is so it's only for, so zones 1 through to 5 is the chief security officer or delegate. But if we go, it's not mentioned on that zone list there, but further from that, there's these compartments or these rooms called SCIFs, which are sensitive compartmented information facilities. These are like, black rooms, basically, where you walk into them, you're not allowed to carry your mobile phone, all electronics get left at the door. And those zones have to be certified by a federal agency.
Oh, I see.
And the design around them is very complex. There's certain cabling requirements. The thickness of cement around the buildings or around the rooms is, has to be certified. As it says there, like alarm systems and everything as well.
Okay, can you give an example of like zone 3, for example? Then what sort of like of control that they need to to be certified as zone 3?
Yep. So zone 3, as it says there, so first and foremost, anything past zone 1 and 2 is no public access. So it's only employees who have access to that area. So 3, 4, and 5 is only employees. If you do have access from external parties or visitors, it's need to know and they come in. Yeah, there's single factor authentication. So that's going to be a swipe card or a PIN code to get into the area. That's why you'll see, like, if ever you visit a government office or something like that, you can walk into a lobby in the front door, but there's always going to be a swipe card door or a PIN code that prevents you from going into the back offices.
I see.
Yeah. The next thing too is like clearance levels. So in the next, I don't know if it's the next chapter from this or one of the previous chapters, but each zone has a certain security clearance level from levels of vetting.
Okay, so there is security clearance for ongoing access here, this column, right? Clearance.
Yes. Yeah. And then, on the next page, there's a table for there you go, for your vetting. So this actually dictates a minimum level of federal security vetting that is required to access those areas. And it's interesting to note that, like, now with the PSPF being adapted by a lot of state governments, you're finding that state government agencies and employees of those agencies are now needing to be federally vetted in order to perform their day-to-day duties. So for any of us here who are considering pursuing a career within the federal government space or even within the state government space, even for consultation, if you're contracted to them, don't be surprised if in the future you're going to have to go through a negative vetting process in order to have access to those contracts or access to those jobs.
So what is the vetting process here? Is this like
so that'll be things like a criminal history check. It also they do vetting on your associations and who you talk to, who you hang out with, your digital footprint. You got to keep in mind that it's not there to find the dirt on you and to dig into you, but it's meant to protect an agency's reputation and ensure that the people they're employing are good people, are suitable, ethical, have integrity, don't associate with criminals, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. So it's not about worrying of preventing attacks from hackers, but it's about disassociating with like people of low reputation. Is that right? It's not. So this clearance is not about like vetting criminal history or.
Oh well, a lot of the time, like it'll do criminal history as a part of it. So if you've got a criminal history, you can be pretty sure you're probably not going to get a job within the federal government. But then again, there are always exceptions to the rules.
Okay.
Look at like some of the federal agents over in America. Some of the best of them are ex-hackers who have been to federal prison and stuff like that. But these whole policies here are designed to provide a level of physical security for a building itself by considering the information that's in those buildings and not just security from like strong walls, but also security as in the people that you're allowing into those areas have to meet a certain level. Because as it was said earlier, insider threats are really, really, they're a really big problem. They don't happen as often as, phishing or something like that, but the damage that can be done from an insider threat is fairly substantial. So these zonings here, that they also protect an agency from insider threats fairly effectively, because what you're doing is it says to get to these areas, an agency should take certain steps to ensure that the people they're hiring or the people they're giving access to these areas are of a certain standard. So it's not just our technical controls, but this also controls the sort of people that you bring in.
Yeah, I just wondering like who give the label of zone 5 or zone 4? I mean, who classify a space as zone X, for example? Is that quite subjective, or is, I mean, who has the authority to say that this is zone 5 or this is zone 1?
Well, that comes down to the agency. An agency would say themselves.
They could mislabel things, right? They could think this
absolutely.
one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a, again, it's a self-assessment where you should be doing it in good faith, and it should be classified based on the type of information. So, for example, your general office. So, say you've got your work desk where you've got your laptop. Assuming you've got a clean desk policy where you're not keeping sensitive stuff around, you would probably put that as a zone 2. It's an office area.
Okay.
But then your server room, where you keep your main database servers, that would probably be a zone 4 or even a zone 5, because it's something where the level of the security classification level of the information that's stored there, or the risk inside that room, is exponentially greater than just a general office desk.
Yeah. I mean, my only worry is that they classify some zone as zone 2, where in fact it should be zone 4, for example. And so all of this policy assume that this security zone has been classified properly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Yep. Wow, it's fascinating. I didn't know that this apply to all. So this apply only to government building, but I can imagine that business can adopt this one too to protect themselves.
So every federal government agency refers to the PSPF as its source of truth. It's the guidelines that they must implement. It's a mandatory compliance document. State governments like Queensland, where I work now, and Tassie, Tassie's not non-compliant. I think it's Tassie and South Australia are the only two that aren't really on board with the PSPF. They decided to write their own. But most state governments as well, even though they don't enforce mandatory compliance with it, they refer to it a lot. They use it as a source of best practice, I guess you would say.
Yeah. I mean, looking at this document, it looks so comprehensive. I mean, so I appreciate the effort of people who have to implement this to make sure like everything they do to comply with this document. There's so many policies, like hundreds or thousands of them, and yeah, it's a big job to comply with all of them. Like here we are at like 1,200, but I think it go down to 300 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's why private businesses don't use it very much, because the funding and the resources required to put it in place, like that's a lot.
Yeah, interesting. But if you have a business that deal with highly sensitive data, for example, then yeah, I think it's a good start. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, like if you were contracted by the military for something. So, for example, Boeing, the Boeing who does all the aeronautics development, they more than likely have to comply with this.
Yeah, I'm sure they have a stricter framework in America when this. Okay, thank you, Connor. It's very interesting. Anyone else want to share their favorite policy with us too? Yes, Marshall. Yes. Which one is your favorite?
The physical security one as well.
Yeah,
it's
quite interesting, because what I find the most fascinating is physical security too, and I've been reading about this for the past few days. Okay, which policy number, please?
Yeah, so 25.4. So that was the 25.4.
4.
Yeah.
Access
So
control. Okay.
Yeah, I just did the access control. This is a pretty broad policy that doesn't go into a great lot of detail, but it basically goes over the access controls or who's authorized to access different areas and who's basically prevent unauthorized access. So yeah, you're seeing there a line about the security zones.
So is this the same zone as Connor has referred to? Same zone?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, and then basically covers off different controls, so like ID cards, acceptable authentication methods, and some controls around visitors. Interestingly, though, the ID cards doesn't just cover off. So it covers off both what staff need to do, so that they need to be worn by all staff at all times while they're. So there's an identifiable card on them at all time, but then it also mandates some technical requirements that it needs to be a unique ID on everyone. I dare say there's to be a lot more details in the procedure on how that ID cards are distributed, audited, and all that kind of information. But yeah, you can see here it's quite broad.
And it didn't refer to any further documents for more detail on identities. It just say the word identity does not even appear on this policy.
No. Yeah.
Maybe it's under control for access control and authorized. Okay. So this one required identity cards and what else?
So the acceptable authentication factors. It says when there's dual, it needs to be two of those. So something you have, something you know, or something you are. They're the only options they're accepting in this. And then dual authentication is required for Zone 5.
It seemed like even for Zone 5, which is supposed to have strongest security requirement, is only like two factors. Two factors are enough. But I guess X as a factor here is much stronger than what we are using in practice, I guess.
Yeah, and I would think for Zone 5 as well that they would want to define what those two factors were. So if they've stated it's something you have with a card and then something you are with a biometric, they should probably say that it's specifically those two for Zone 5, and some of the other zones could be any of these options. That's my thought, 2 cents on it at least.
Okay.
Yeah, and then visitor control, access control. It's similar. Goes into the visitors' responsibilities of having to register before they enter, to wear their pass and make it visible at all times. But also responsibilities of the reception and guards.
Yeah, it's very interesting that they spell out like who is be responsible here. Receptionists and the guards. Okay, interesting. Right, so it's quite comprehensive. It's access control to zone 1 to 5, and this is a physical access control system in terms of, so they have ID cards, authentication factors, and visitors. Okay, they did not say about like how this authentication work in the back, right? Or okay, interesting. To be honest, it's still quite a bit vague. I thought they would go much more details on the policy.
Yeah, especially when you look at the 25.4, where it says what it's encompassing. It's saying personnel, vehicles, and equipment. It's really only showing ID cards and personnel. It says nothing about vehicles. I'm sure they could be
Yeah, because we see a lot on movies where you can park a big van like outside, and in it there's a lot of expensive equipment that can eavesdrops and listen to the network, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
they don't have it here. Okay, interesting. Okay. All right. Thank you, Marsha. It's very I think it's interesting to note that many of us find this physical security fascinating, because this is something that we don't usually pay attention to. And this document is like listing all this best practice for us to see here. And like, for example, we go to the building, we do not know like why there's an access here and why there's why the door doesn't have the access card there. And yeah, it's all designed with purpose and interesting to see. So cybersecurity is not only about cyber assets, and physical security is as important. Okay, so anyone else want to share their favorite policy for a quick 5 minutes? Okay, I strongly recommend reading through this policy if you have some free time. I mean, it's so comprehensive. Let's talk about like data sharing and data disposal as well, and record keeping, and how to classify security, and how to register for the assets, and life cycle of technology, like yeah, how you purchase one, and how you manage, how you configure, and how you decommission some piece of digital asset. It's very, very interesting. But I think that's it for today. Then I think thank you everyone for joining the discussion. And as I said, if you have trouble sleeping, for example, and you want to find a good read, I think this is a good read to you. And yeah, so I hope you have a good week, and good luck with the assignment, and I will see you guys next week. All right, bye bye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.